The altered scale might be a scale that you've heard mentioned before. In this video, we're going to talk about what is it? Where do we use it? How do we use it? And I'm going to give you what I think is perhaps the healthiest way to think about this exotic scale. Let's get into it. All right, so what is it? You might have heard someone say the altered scale. It's also known as the Superlocrian scale. And I've also heard it referred to as the diminished whole tone scale, just because of how it's built up. All interchangeable. I just say the altered scale because it's shorter, and Superlocrian sounds a bit like it should be part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So, altered scale for this video, use whatever you want. So it is a 7-note scale, and it is the 7th mode of the melodic minor scale. So in the key of A, good guitar key, it sounds like this. Now, you may hear, just from that, with a bit of context, that it doesn't kind of sound like a scale that you want to sort of hang around on. You know what I mean? You're not going to be playing songs that are like... you know, loads of really weird tensions and stuff. So it is a scale that you use to create tension. So you create tension, and what do you do when you create tension? That's right, you need to resolve it. But before we get to that, I'll just show you a nice compact fingering. We're just going to do it in 1 octave, and it's going to stay on the top 4 strings. So it's going to be more useful for improvising that way if you're new to it. So we're going to start at this A, 7th fret of the D string. And we're going to go 7 and 8s on that string. So straight away. So you got 7 and 8. And then on the G string, you're going to go 5, 6, 8. On the B string, you're just going to go 6, 8. So. And then you're going to finish 5th fret of the high E on that A. So the whole thing. Now, as I've said, you can think of this as the 7th mode of the melodic minor. So you could think of this as B flat melodic minor, if I change the context. However, that works in terms of fingering and getting to the notes. But in terms of how you want to use it and how you want to think about it and how I'm going to refer to it in this video, you want to be thinking from the root note of A. So even though it's the same thing, there is some kind of internal thought magic that sort of needs to happen, I think, to really get to grips with this thing. You want to be thinking from the root note of the chord that you're on, rather than trying to sort of do a bit of a hack or a bit of a trick. So first thing, if this is a new scale to you, just get used to that fingering and play it up and down a few times, and play it against the root note of A, because you can get the open A. It's quite a useful thing to be able to do. So. Just wander up and down a bit, kind of get used to the sort of geography of it before we get into like the real thinky parts. So that's one fingering for the scale. In terms of where we use it, as the name implies, the altered scale, we play it over altered chords. Now, an altered chord is basically any chord that has an altered tension in it. So sharp 5, flat 5, sharp 9, flat 9. Any of those, any kind of order really. You can also do it on just the normal dominant 7 to create tension, which we'll do in a little bit. But any of these kind of things. So that is an A7 with the sharp 5 and the sharp 9. Or something like this, which has got the sharp 5 and the flat 9. So those tensions are present again. Now this one, just to potentially set off a little light bulb moment, if I take this and put my finger here, I've got an E flat 9. Now you might have been playing blues and done that little move, to get you to your 4 chord. We're basically going to do the same thing. This. That right there is kind of a resolving sort of tension moment that you might have already come across and you didn't even know you were doing it. So basically any chord that's got any of these alterations in, sharp 5, flat 9, sharp 9, any of those, it will work on. Now, as I've mentioned, the kind of resolving tension thing, one of the best places to kind of start trying to wrangle with this tension is a 5 chord going to a 1 chord. Or, in the context of a blues, the 1 chord going to a 4 is basically the same relationship. In that relationship, you're making the 1 chord into a 5 chord to push into the 4 chord, if that makes sense. A couple of things just to kind of get your eyes on the prize with this sort of thing. If you know any of these chord shapes, so with a sharp 9, flat 9 and all that kind of stuff, is playing those chords and then trying to resolve quite neatly to the next chord. So for instance, I did this one. I could resolve this chord down to a D9 if I'm doing a blues thing. I could also go, if I was just going A7 to some sort of D major chord. But because this is going down to the, I could go. So the bit that you hear is this. It's that tension resolving to that sort of consonant note in the next chord. And it also works over a minor, because it's the tension resolving to this note really, that's what you want to hear. Or if I did this chord, maybe you could go, you could resolve up to the major 7 in that case. Or you could put both in. Like that. So something else to play around with is, if you know some of these chords, try and kind of spot where the tension wants to go and then land on the appropriate chord after that with the resolution note on the top of the chord, if that makes sense. So in terms of getting this into your playing, the kind of sort of Fisher-Price day one altered scale thing is, once you've learnt it, is what people will do is, say they've got a 2-5-1, they'll have their E minor 7, and maybe they'll play some really nice stuff over that. And then the altered chord comes up, sort of A7 altered, and you kind of get this, send up the altered flare, and then sort of pray that they're going to land on the right note at the end. You want to be a bit more intentional than that. So the way to get there is to look at each tension in turn and figure out where can it go, or where does it kind of want to go. So you can look at this scale as having 3 in notes and then 4 out notes to make the whole scale at 7 notes. So the in notes, this is all in context of the A7. You got the root, you got the third, you got the flat 7. So you got this note, this note. And you got another root there, another 3 there, another flat 7 there. So those are the in notes. Then the out notes, so we'll take them one at a time. We take the first note, which is the flat 9. We think about where this wants to go when you put it in as a tension note. It wants to go, wants to resolve down ideally. What you need to do is ask yourself, when you do resolve down a semitone, what is that note against the new chord? So this is where you need to start thinking about the chord that you're on and your destination. So you're thinking about 2 things at once. You're thinking about where you are and where you're going. And that's a big thing when it comes to adding tension and resolving it. Because if you just start adding tension and then you don't really sort of resolve it, it's kind of unsatisfying, and it sounds like you're not in control of the scale really, or in control of your lines. So the flat 9, quite nicely, wants to go down a semitone. So if we're over an A, then I resolve down a semitone to a D. What is that note in relation to the D? It's the 5th. If you said 5th, 2 internet points to you. You can also do it in this octave. So if I know that, what I can do is just add that to my in notes. So the root, the third, and the flat 7. Now just add the flat 9. So we're not going straight in with the full scale. We're just going to play around with adding that flat 9 to resolve to the 5th of the D. And you want to put it at kind of the end of the line really, like the end of the bar, to resolve in. If you try and play around with just So there, chucked in at the end. You can hear it as a beat 4, beat 1. With a bit of context. So you can hear that I'm targeting that flat 9 as a tension at the end of the bar to push in to the next chord, which is basically what you're doing. And you can get there a bit earlier and kind of, it draws out the tension a little bit more, but that's essentially what we're going to do. So now if we look at the next tension note, we've got this note here, which against the A might look like a minor third, but in this case, it's what you call sharp 9. Now that's an interesting one because over the A, it's a sharp 9. But in context of if you're going to a D7, so if we're doing a 1 to a 4 in a blues, it'd just be the flat 7. So in a situation like this, what you can do is stick on it and then let the chord resolve the tension for you. So you're letting the chords do the work. So for instance, if I'm here, see what I mean? So I'm sticking on that note even though it rubs against the A7, and then I'm letting the chords do the work. So I'm letting the chords kind of like change your perception when the chord changes, basically. Again, with some context. That kind of thing, and because that note is in the minor pentatonic, you're probably accustomed to hearing that and perhaps not intellectualizing it to that level, but just something to note. In a different context, maybe you could take that note and resolve with a semitone, and then you're going to land on the major 7 of a D major 7 chord. But for now, we'll just stick with this kind of 1 to 4 in a blues idea. So the next tension, one that you're probably quite accustomed to if you're playing blues a lot of the time, is the flat 5. Now, if we look at where this is, and think about where we're going, so you might think, oh, it wants to go, which would be the 5 of the A, and in that scenario would be right. But if we're thinking about resolving this to a perceived 1 chord or 4 chord in a blues, if you move up a semitone, that gives you the 9th of the D, which is still cool, but might not sound as strong as potentially resolving down to a D, which would be the root of the D chord. So that might be a stronger resolution. See what I mean? It's still fine, it still works, but it almost sounds like you're going to a 5 chord, but that's just perhaps my ear leaning towards it. So a bit of context. And the last tension is the sharp 5. Probably one of my favourite ones actually, because it wants to resolve up a semitone to the major third. So if you're going to a dominant 7 or a major 7 or some sort of major chord, it's really nice. Or and it does quite nicely go down to the 9th, to be fair. Like that. It's probably one you've heard a few times. So again, just adding that in with our 3 in notes and the sharp 5 as the 1 out note for now, might get something like this. Like that. So you're eyeing up each individual tension and where it wants to go. And the reason for that is when you start playing the scale as a whole, you can kind of aim for your resolution point. So there we've done it by just adding 1 at a time. And you can, that's quite a nice way to do it, to be fair. You could start, if you're going A7 to D7, you could start with your normal A7 stuff. So there, started with normal kind of bluesy, mixolydian, dare I say it, kind of stuff. And then just added in the sharp 5 as a tension. I didn't think about the altered scale, I just added that 1 note in. And then you're going to start, you can kind of build out from there, rather than just kind of chucking the scale in and then trying to land, you know, with a bit of a prayer, if that makes sense. So just that in itself is quite a bit to play around with. And what it's going to do is develop this awareness of when the resolution point is coming and being able to hit that chord and stick the landing. So then a little exercise to kind of practice these resolutions is to pick your resolution note. So for instance, say we did flat 9 to 5. What you're going to do is these are going to be notes 4 and 5. So you're going to have a 5-note group. And this is going to be notes 4 and 5. Why 5? That's not very musical. It's 4 notes of tension and then the 1 note of resolution. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, land. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, resolution. If that makes sense. So over a chord. Or like that. It doesn't have to be like that. One thing I quite like to do is to either go scale-wise or thirds. So I try not to, as a game, I try not to do anything bigger than a third. So that could be like this. So there I went. So I went sharp 9, root, sharp 5, third, and then resolve to the root. So I went 1, 2, 3, 4, resolution. Try it from a different note. Same again, I went flat 9, sharp 9, root, sharp 5, third. And experiment how many different ways you can get to that third of the next chord. So trying to do that over and over again, you slowly start to develop this awareness of how many notes you need to get to your target resolution without overdoing it. So then what you could do is try and add more notes or double it, so double the time. Do that kind of thing. And a little tip is, if you ever find yourself 1 away from the note that you want and you've still got 1 note left, like rhythmically, you can add a chromatic note either a semitone above or below to kind of nudge you in. So there I went. I went like that. So I'm going. I've still got one note left, and I could go. That still works. But to make it sound smoother, I can go. And it adds that little bit of jazz element to it as well. So that's like a bit of a kind of safety out, kind of, but it also leads you into things like enclosures, which we'll talk about another time. So a little tip list for the end of the video. Altered scale, also known as a superlocrian, 7-note scale, 7th mode of the melodic minor. So if you start your melodic minor scale on the 7th degree, you'll get the same scale. It's used to create tension and then hopefully to resolve that tension to a tonic chord or a perceived tonic chord. It's also really good to create tension going from the 1 chord to the 4 chord in a blues, kind of around bar 4, just before it goes to the 4 chord. It's used over altered dominant chords, so a dominant 7th chord with a sharp 5, flat 9, or sharp 9, or any mixture of those kind of things. Or you can use it over a standard dominant 7 chord if it's a resolving dominant. So you're creating the tension and then releasing it to go home. You can see the scale as 3 in notes and 4 tension notes. And take some time with each tension note and finding out where it wants to resolve. Do this going to a dominant 7 chord, going to a major 7 chord, going to a minor 7 chord. So 3 different perceived homes that have slightly different chord makeups to land on. And then build out from there, creating 5-note phrases, so 4 tensions and then 1 resolution note to land on. And you can build out from there, adding more notes from the scale, playing around with trying to resolve or stick the landing from further away. And then one other tip is once you've got used to that sense of resolution, is to add a little bit more content on the end for the home chord. Because what can happen is when you practice, you play these things, land on the resolution note, and then stop. So you want to keep the phrase going, so it's like one long line across all of the stuff. So the altered scale, if you're new to this scale, I hope that helps. It's kind of, to do it properly, it's kind of slow. But play around with it slowly and get used to these resolutions. That's the biggest thing. You're creating tension that needs to be resolved. You know, with great tension comes great responsibility, as someone said once. If you like this kind of thing, leave a comment with any kind of suggestions. Hit the like button, subscribe, all that YouTube stuff, and I'll see you on another one. Peace.